The hosts feel it would be a little unkind to present this podcast without just a word of friendly warning. We are about to unfold the story of Frankenstein, a man of science who sought to create a man after his own image without reckoning upon God. It is one of the strangest tales ever told. It deals with the two great mysteries of creation, life and death. I think it will thrill you. It may shock you. It might even horrify you. So if any of you feel that you do not care to subject your nerves to such a strain, now's your chance to. Well, we've warned you. Hello, and welcome once again to the Frankencast. I'm the mad scientist, Anthony Bowman. My pronouns are he, him, and I'm joined as always by...
your mother's massager, that is, Eric Velasquez. My pronouns are also he, him. Choose whichever one of those you prefer. I think the massager might have won.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's a big theme. That's a theme you don't expect to just have it, like, running throughout a movie.
Right. Yeah, this is a weird one. Like, this is one that I had not seen before, but...
So, this week we're talking about Dr. Frankenstein on Campus, or... what's
Flick.
the other name for it?
Yeah, Flick, for some reason.
Okay. I don't know what's called Flick. Like, is it in reference to, like, a remote control? Because that's another thing that's kind of a theme. That's the biggest theme is control.
Yeah, I mean, because you hear, Flick is just kind of like, slang for a movie, but it doesn't, Flick, as far as that, would make a little bit more sense, I guess, just because, yeah, it's just a very generic, I think Flick maybe is, like, something that, like, a hippie would say, like, we're gonna go catch a flick, but still, even though this movie's very hippie-oriented, it still doesn't really, Dr. Frankenstein on Campus tells you what to expect. Flick is, pretty plain. It doesn't really set you up for what's going to happen in this movie.
Right, like, even if it is a reference to remote control, like, because I can imagine, like, you're flicking through the, channels.
Yeah.
But this is also a time in which that would be an obscure thing to say. Like, because you got 3 channels, maybe, right?
Right, yeah.
Right? So, yeah. I mean, you're not flicking through any, I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah, and there's not a lot of information out there about this movie, so... Yeah, I wasn't able to find any reason why it is sometimes called that.
Yeah, kind of a diamond in the rough, I'll honestly say.
Yeah, it is. It does some interesting stuff, but like this movie, there's no like DVD release of this. I ended up finding. I got bootlegs from 2 different places, and because one of them was a little glitchy, and then the other one was the exact same file. So like, there's like one version of this bouncing around the internet. You can find it from less reputable sources. You can also like buy bootlegs from various sites, and you're gonna get the same movie. It's it's got some glitchiness to it. It starts with like static at the beginning, like it's somebody has taped this off a TV onto a VHS and then uploaded it to the internet at some point.
Oh yeah, and at the end, I mean, there's literally of the version we saw. There's references to different movies that were coming on that channel in the 90s.
Yeah.
So this is definitely not a. It's going to be hard to find it, but I mean, once you do, it just don't expect much out of the version you get. Is what I'm saying. All right, let's also go ahead and get the content warnings out of the way. There will be animal cruelty, vague racism. Like it's definitely dancing, or it's going too close.
Yeah.
In certain concepts, as far as martial arts, let's just say it that. I think that's the nicest way to say it.
Yeah.
And basically mysticism surrounding that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And the fact that they use Taekwondo as, like, I don't know, like a version of what I guess a lot of people use Shaolin Kung Fu as. You know?
It's like this very exotic thing that nobody's heard of.
Right. And basically the practitioner of the movie being, what's his name? Tony Bales. Basically, probably he's one of the guys at a McDojo, and he takes this way too seriously.
Right. Yeah.
Yep. All right. So I think those are the big ones. Oh, and nudity. Sorry.
Yeah.
There's
nudity.
nudity.
It's like anymore, like we hardly even register the nudity. There's nudity in like half the stuff we watch at least.
Yeah. I mean, if it's not full frontal, I'm desensitized to it now, right?
Yeah, this is pretty tame as far as the sex stuff in this. It's actually handles it pretty well. Like there's nothing content warning-y there, at least, thankfully.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. No, like actual grape or essay or anything like that.
Yeah. This is all consensual.
Yep.
Some hippie-free love going on, but everybody seems generally okay with what's going on. There's a little jealousy, but nobody's too mean about it or anything. But
yeah, and I also feel okay. So this is made in 1970. I feel like most of their ideas are strictly taken from the writer's time in the 60s.
Mm-hmm. Oh,
so
yeah.
There is some. I wouldn't say it's an analog to the civil rights, but it's also kind of like some weird Luddite mentality of yeah. Computers are bad, and they're going to take over everything, which I guess came true when living in dystopia. Yeah. But it wasn't as bad as they thought it was.
Yeah, this is definitely a movie of its time for sure.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. So we start off with two guys just slapping each other's swords. That's not a euphemism. That's literally what's going on.
Yeah, it's like the most boring fencing duel I've ever seen. Like they never move their feet. They're just flapping their, waving their hands back and forth. Neither guy seems particularly intense or committed to the bit. And then they're interrupted by a university head, like a dean or president or something, who is angry. Duels are illegal and banned on campus, and they're in trouble for this. And he suspends one of the participants, but the other one, Victor Frankenstein, he expels.
Dun, dun, dun. Just kicks him right out, right?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, no.
Yeah, so he's already gotten kicked out of school in the first, minute and a half of the movie, basically.
Yeah, and by the way, the fact that it was a duel, I'm like, oh, that is the tamest duel I've ever seen.
Yeah. Yeah, it looked like they were just practicing more than they were barely even sparring. This is not work up a sweat level of fencing.
No. These guys didn't strain themselves.
Yeah. And we go straight from that to a hippie dance club. There's a rock band playing. There's psychedelic lighting. The camera's doing that fast zoom in and out thing. Just kind of doing the whole psychedelic thing, and we see that Frankenstein is there, and he is dancing with just your central casting groovy hippie chick,
right.
Long blonde hair, and we'll find out her name's Susan. And she says that she and Frankenstein have good vibrations.
Yeah. Well, she's kind of into the whole crystals and astrology thing, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Just all the hippie stereotypes all rolled into this girl. Mm-hmm. When they finish dancing, they go sit down next to Tony, the guy that you mentioned earlier, who is Frankenstein's friend and Susan's boyfriend. Right,
for this one scene.
Yeah.
And then pretty much immediately once he just starts talking to Frankenstein, it's almost she effectively dumps Tony at this point.
Yeah.
And Tony's watching his relationship just end in slow motion.
Yeah, but it's that he's not. There's a moment or two where he seems a little jealous about it, but for the most part, it just seems we're just chill hippies, and if she moves
free
on,
love.
Man, that's what she let her go, and so they're all just kind of at this point friendly. They're all chatting together. Frankenstein mentions that he's from Transylvania.
Right. What is he? He says, "We Transylvanians have rhythm." Okay, sure, I believe you. And then also we get Tony doing his taekwondo shtick, where he's like, "I'm going to show you my writing stance," and that's amazing, I guess.
Yeah. He talks about that. That's a good stance for sex, to build up the sex muscles.
Right. Apparently, taekwondo not only teaches you mental control, but it also teaches you the benefit, almost Kama Sutra kind of techniques. Right. It builds up your stamina and all that stuff. Basically, they're using Taekwondo. They're using Taekwondo as everything. Okay.
Yeah, like you said, it's just general Eastern mysticism. In the course of this conversation, I think they say the word Oriental like 5 times.
Yeah.
Which, at this point, we know that you only use that word to describe rugs. That's the only time that word's okay. But yeah, here they're just throwing it around like it's nothing.
Right, because at the time they probably didn't see it as anything. Because 70.
Yeah, exactly. It's funny because, like, he's got this whole Eastern mysticism thing, but then Susan starts talking about astrology, and he just, like, Tony immediately puts her down about that this is, like, a dumb hobby. Yeah.
Right. What you gotta do is you gotta get in your horse stance.
Right. My pseudoscience thing is okay, but yours is not.
Yours is not, yeah, exactly.
But we also, over the course of this, we learned that Frankenstein is a Gemini. I think they said...
Well, he's a Capricorn, he thinks. He doesn't know.
Yeah, he says he's a Capricorn, but then he says his birthday's June 2nd, I think. And she's like, no, that means you're a Gemini. And I'm a Gemini. So I was like, awesome. That's cool.
Well, I'm a Capricorn, so that's funny.
And so they're kind of chatting, and then like a guy gets up on the stage, like stop, the band stops, and he kind of, it's like an MC kind of thing.
Now, is this David? It seems like David.
I think
the guy
so.
We'll find
Yeah.
David.
Yeah. We'll get this guy's kind of like the only like sort of secondary character. He's not like our main trio, but we'll get him in several scenes.
Yeah, well, he's basically the leader of the Luddite / hippies, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
he's that one poli-sci student that just like takes everything too far.
Right. And that's what he's here to do right here. Is this concert is a fundraiser to collect money to help bail out a couple political activists, which we find out are just they got arrested for drugs, but they're political activists. And he's like, a couple of the kids have rich parents and they already got bailed out, but we've got a few who need bail money.
So it's interesting they take up collections for these guys, right?
Yeah, they pass the hat. And everybody puts in money, but Frankenstein won't because he doesn't approve of drugs.
Right, and I love how David's like, man, you're too uptight. And Frankenstein's like, no, I'm down loose. Okay.
Yeah, that's like such a like bad like dad joke or something.
Right?
Yeah. Once he walks away, the trio there continues their discussion, and Frankenstein talks about that, like, he's got to stay on the up and up because he's got to surpass his family's checkered past and bad reputation for monster making.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, of course, ever since that Mary Shelley wrote that novel about my family, so where does that fall in, though? Because that's an interesting concept.
Yeah, like, because sometimes it's been like, she wrote a book about my grandpa who did this thing. This one, it almost sounds like he's saying, she wrote a work of fiction and used our family name. And then ruined us.
Right.
It's hard to tell exactly, but, like, it sounded, in this case, more like they hadn't actually made any monsters. They just have this bad, stigma because of this novel.
Or they came close to making monsters and Shelley, like, busted up the family business, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah.
Who knows?
But yeah, once they kind of talk about that, I think Frankenstein and Susan go dance again. And then we just cut to, like, the next day back at school. Frankenstein is working in the lab and talking to a professor.
He startles Professor Preston.
Mm-hmm. They kind of have a conversation about, like, brain research. They're both very fascinated by the human brain. Mm-hmm. The professor's like, actually, I've been running some tests on some like cadaver brains and some animal brains, but how would you feel about me hooking an EEG machine up to you and running some tests on you?
Right. It's like, I need your brain. And I'm like, is this going to be a turnaround? Is Preston going to be the real Frankenstein? And, Frankenstein going to be the monster?
But yeah, it's a non-invasive test. Like, he just puts the little helmet thing on him. And looks at some brainwave stuff and is like, okay, that's real, that's interesting. And he's like, I'd like to do some more tomorrow and just kind of have like a baseline and continue the tests. And Victor's like, well, tomorrow I'm being interviewed for the school paper, so I can't meet up with you tomorrow.
Right. So this interview, it's a hell of an interview technique that Susan has. They're just having a picnic, drinking wine. And we learn that he was born in, Schleswig-Holstein?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, basically, and he's like, named after the cow, the Holstein, or whatever you want to call it. So, yeah, and we get a little bit more of the backstory of the Frankenstein family, talking about how his ancestor, the original Dr. Frankenstein, wasn't really a monster like that. And it's like, okay. I mean, sure, maybe. Who knows? We don't know his actual story.
And then just like midway through the interview, Victor just takes off Susan's top.
Right.
And then like we get like a really weird shot that's just like of her chest and his hands, and like it's so awkward. Like this looks like the first time this guy has ever touched boobs. Like he has, it's just very awkward and like weird groping.
Right, and I was like, oh, is this a 70s porn that Anthony's done to me now? No, it's just...
Yeah, this one, I mean, it's pretty tame. Like, I think she undresses down to her, like, underwear, and they lay down and kind of make out for a few minutes. And then, because she's a hippie chick, she, like, gets up and just kind of, like, starts frolicking around the forest. And we just get this really, really bizarre scene where she's frolicking around.
Oh, yeah, epilepsy warning, by the way.
Oh,
Should have did that. That's going to happen twice, just to let you know. 2 times.
Yeah, it's like, so we have her frolicking, then we have, like, superimposed over it, just, like, Victor sitting there drinking wine and watching her. So, like, we're seeing those both at the same time. But then also there's like a flashing still image that's like a close-up of Victor's face that just keeps like kind of getting like subliminally interposed in, and it gets like faster and faster.
Right. It's really weird and I don't like it.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like this is just like they were like, let's do some like weird psychedelic hippie stuff. That'll be cool.
Yeah, subliminal messaging is a thing and epilepsy is not.
Right. So eventually Susan comes back and is like, I'm naked. Why are you still fully dressed? And he's like, well, getting undressed is for peasants. So I guess
this guy's a never dude, like from Arrested Development, right?
I was getting ready to say the same thing. Yep. And that will come up a couple times. He is 100% a never nude. It's amazing.
Right. Which that's got to put a damper on their relationship to a degree, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah, we never see them like actually do the deed, but I mean, I don't know.
It's heavily implied.
Yeah, it seems like he must be like, just use the zipper and stay fully dressed, I guess. I don't.
Bad times.
It seems like Susan would be like, I'm not comfortable with this. This is bizarre.
Yeah, no, there's no way they've been intimate like as much as they will be, and she hasn't seen like him without his shirt on.
Yeah,
I don't believe it.
But yeah, so they end up kind of like continuing to kind of make out there in the woods, and then we just cut to our first protest scene, which, as you mentioned earlier, it's a hippie protest, but they are not protesting Vietnam or some of the normal stuff we would expect. They're protesting computers.
Right, they literally have signs that say, "We're flesh and blood, not metal and oil." It's like, okay, yes, but also, what are we doing here?
Yeah, it's very vague. Like they're just opposed to the idea of computers.
Right.
Yeah, it's very strange. And we just get like a little bit of the protest, and then we kind of they're like out in front of one of the university buildings, and then we just cut inside where Professor is doing a lecture about brains. He says a lot of like weird innuendo stuff about how they're soft and wet. The brain is
soft and wet.
And like he keeps saying it, and like some of the students are even like whispering at each other like, why does he keep saying it like that?
Well, I think he's turning on a couple students because they're just kind of eyeballing the members of the opposite sex like, hey.
Yeah. This, I guess, is where we kind of get indication of why the hippies might be upset about computers, because his work is specifically about how brains can maybe be controlled with electrodes.
Okay. I mean, fair, I guess. Sure, why not? But, like, this is going across campus, and everyone's like, all right, we're shutting both Frankenstein and Dr. Preston, or Professor Preston down. Like, why wouldn't everyone be like, no, thank you? Yeah.
And, like, Victor even, like, stands up and is like, I know you have this idea that you can connect wires to your little remote box and connect them to electrodes, but I think someday wireless technology will exist, and we can control with a wireless remote.
I mean, very prescient, sure.
Yeah. And yeah, Preston is like, yeah, maybe someday. I don't think that's gonna happen anytime soon. But yeah, that'd be great. That'd be much better than connecting a bunch of weird wires to someone's brain.
Right, yeah. Frank specifically mentions having a better box from, and something that always sets the red flags off, superior human beings. So, okay, rough. We don't like that. But of course, his classmates are actually sensible because they start passing around a toy Frankenstein or a wind-up Frankenstein and set it loose, which, that's fun.
Yeah.
I would love that joke.
Yeah, it was really great. Like, it's like a... like knee high. It's like a really big toy, and it's just like very Karloff. It's got its arms out, and it's just like walking around, and everyone's laughing, and Victor is pissed. He kicks it over and then stomps on it.
Right. That's showing everyone you're not mad, Victor. But of course, Preston suggests to Frankenstein, as class is dismissed, maybe you shouldn't take classmates too seriously, especially with a name like Frankenstein, right?
Yeah. He kind of comforts him as everybody else is filing out, and then he's like, I know you got some stuff you're wanting to get into. Here, why don't you have a key so you can get into the lab after hours and use the equipment?
Nothing could go wrong there, right? If you're working unsupervised.
Yeah. But he is at least smart enough to be be cool about this. Don't tell anybody you have this key. Be sneaky. This could come back to get me, and I'm doing you a favor here.
Yeah.
And so they walk out together and bump into, the protest still in progress. Preston, immediately tries to, shut down the protest, and he's, just doing the worst job. He's like, you idiot kids, you don't know what you're talking about, you fools, you're, he, basically calls them Luddites and that they don't understand science and everything.
He makes an origin of the species joke.
Yeah.
He's where's the origin of your species?
Right, that the hippies are something less than human. So he's not gonna reach them with this kind of language.
No.
And then the dean steps out and is like, "Cool it, Press. Let me talk to him." And he gets up and actually gives a genuine speech and is like, "I support your all's right to protest." And I understand your concerns, but you're misunderstanding what's going on here, and it's really not nearly as bad as you're afraid it is. But I would love to come by my office. My door's always open. We can talk about it. I'd love to show you what the work that's going on here, so that you're not afraid of it, which is the right way to approach this.
Yeah, he even prefers love to war. He's meeting them on their level, which good deal. I don't believe any other dean at this time would ever consider that, but good for you, Catwell.
Yeah. Yeah, so, that does, the protesters kind of, they heed his words, and, it kind of disperses the protests and everything. Then we get Victor going into his apartment, and...
Let's talk about how his apartment is the most 1970s thing outside of the Brady Bunch.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure they had that little, what is it, the conversation nook that's cut in, that little couch area.
Yeah, it's definitely it just looks out of a 70s Better Homes and Gardens magazine or something. It's pretty great. And but Susan is already there waiting for him, which he was not expecting and is kind of annoyed by.
Right, she's already got a drink in hand, so she's ready to go, I guess.
And I think she's wearing one of his shirts and pants.
Right, just his shirt.
Yeah.
So she's making her intentions very clear.
And he's like, you were supposed to come by this evening. I've got other stuff I need to do first. And she's just really flirty with him. And he's like, but I got work to do. And she's like, well, why don't you show me your work? I'm interested in it.
And about that time is when the red flags go up when the dog comes into the room.
Yeah, this scene is intense.
It is intense.
I'm curious about how the scene was done, because it's either well-trained animals and really good editing or possible for real animal cruelty, because this scene is pretty hard to watch.
I mean, if it was actual animals fighting, it's relatively bloodless. I think I didn't see any blood. So, I mean, and it does feel like the dog was playing, because he does the, jumping down onto the floor kind of with the paws extended. So, at the very least, the dog's playing, even though the cat may not be.
Yeah, the cat looks fucking pissed.
Yeah, the cat does look fucking pissed. So, that's probably how it went down. So, animal abuse on the part of the cat, training on the part of the dog.
Yeah, so what he's been working on is, while Susan wasn't looking, he implanted transmitters in both her cat and dog. These are her pets, not their collective pets.
And you should be asking, where are the stitches? No, the reason why is he inserted them with a high-pressured air gun. He shot him in the head with these electrodes.
Mm-hmm. Like the No Country for Old Men kind of things, right? Like that's kind of what...
I feel like that's the case, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Which, that's not good.
No.
There's a lot of room for error there, man.
Yeah. And so, yeah, we've got Caesar the dog and Cleopatra the cat.
Very poetic.
Yeah. And obviously Susan's like, what? You did what to my pets? Like, that's not cool. And he's like, well, but let me show you what I've done now. And so he pulls out a remote and presses a few buttons. And, as we kind of implied, the dog and cat just instantly, like, get into a fight.
Yeah.
And yeah, the cat is hissing and scratching and, like, its hackles are up and everything. Like, the cat is definitely angry. But, like, they're on... A lot of it is, like, just a close-up of the cat or a close-up of the dog. But there are some moments where, like, they're in frame together and, like,
right.
touching. So, hopefully... I hope that it's just, like, this is a trainer who has some animals that he has kind of worked up where they can do this and that they're fine. But, yeah, it looks pretty intense.
Well, needless to say, Cleopatra kills Caesar.
Yeah. Obviously Susan is like, you just killed my dog. Like,
right.
And Victor's just like, yeah, but animals have to die for science. Like, that's just, that's how it is. It's guinea pigs. We use animals in the lab all the time.
Bro, he's like, he tries to justify it by like, hey, at least it wasn't humans. It's like, that's not the point, my man. There's a lot of steps along the way to get to those level of animal trials.
Yeah, and it's like, animal cruelty in general for science isn't great, but I understand that there are certain things where it's a necessity, but you don't kill somebody's pet. Yeah,
right.
You get animals specifically bred for science, and yeah, not something that someone is emotionally attached to.
Yeah, I mean, I would love for there to be another way to test certain things, and I'm sure for most situations you could just avoid that, but I don't know.
I think at this point, where possible, like cosmetics and stuff, I don't think are on animals as much anymore. Right. But there is still stuff where, like, we got to find out if these cells are going to grow in rats and stuff like that. I get it. Yeah. But yeah, again, you don't use somebody's pet. And, like, Victor is so heartless that, like, he just picks up her dead dog, and throws it in a trash bag. And you just see her, like, looking away, like, tears in her eyes. Like, this is not... Like, even if you had done this, you should at least try to act apologetic and comfort her. But nope, he's just like, trash.
Yeah, I feel like this would be a relationship ender for literally everyone. Mm-hmm. I don't think anyone would be like, nah, this is fine.
Yeah, but for some reason, Susan sticks around.
Yep.
The next scene, then, we just see Victor walking through campus. He bumps into Tony, and they're kind of chatting, and then they both bump into... David, is that what we said?
David working on his car.
Yeah. And David's like, are you guys going to be at the club tonight? And is Susan going to be there? And Tony's like, you better ask him rather than me. Like, I don't know what Susan's up to anymore.
And Frank's like, I'll try. And David, of course, I like David's response. Yeah, don't strain yourself, buddy. Don't get worked up about it.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think he really cares much for Victor. Mm-hmm. So then we just pretty much cut to the club that night. The first thing we see is a girl,
the girl with
in
the
like
belt.
She's in like a button-up shirt that's like unbuttoned, kind of low, and like you know those. I don't know if many people even know what these are anymore, but they're weight loss machines.
Right.
Yeah,
well, they're the exercise belts that like shake the fat off or whatever the bullshit idea. Well, she's not using them for that purpose. She's definitely using them for another purpose.
Yeah, like she's high and I think she's enjoying it, but the camera is definitely enjoying that, the belt is jiggling her boobs right in, right in our faces. Then some guy comes over and he's like, man, what is it? Like they're both super stoned doing like the hippie stereotype to the max. He wants to put the belt on his head to see like how the vibration feels to his brain or something.
Apparently it works really well on the brain too. I don't know.
Yeah, he seems to be really enjoying it.
Mm-hmm.
We just kind of like get some random scenes of just like people dancing, people making out on couches,
sex, drugs, rock and roll, all that good stuff.
And then we get like this really weird thing that they're doing, which is
Listen, don't judge people, Anthony. It's not like I knew people like this in college and high school. They just got stoned and put hard hats on and just headbutted each other like goats. Whatever. No.
Yeah, it's nice to know that like Jackass type stuff has been going on well before Jackass. Yeah, they're literally just helmet jousting, just running at each other full force, crashing into each other.
It's not like this is going to cause long-lasting damage to their necks and spines or anything like that.
And like, so one guy wins, and then everybody's like, he's like, looking for another challenger, and everybody's like, Tony, you should use your Taekwondo skills.
Right? There are headbutts in Taekwondo, sure. I don't think they're quite like this, though.
Yeah. But yeah, so Tony's like, all right, fine, I'll do it. And he does win.
With his Taekwondo skills.
Right. And then, like, immediately afterwards, he gets in an argument with Susan about drugs that, like, she's trying to, like, I think she's getting ready to take something, and he's like, you shouldn't even need, if you had my Taekwondo skills, you could control your own brain and just get high off of your own, inner chemistry, basically.
Man, this guy's getting high off the smell of his own asshole.
Yeah. So they're kind of arguing, and then Victor arrives. And even though Tony's like talking down about drugs, he instantly pulls out the telltale aluminum foil wrapped up, of hash, and is like, "Hey, Victor, can you hold this for me for just a couple minutes? I got to go talk to somebody, and I don't want to have it on me."
Right. And of course, at that time, the school newspaper reporter comes by and is like, "Oh, get him with that. Get a photo of him real quick."
Yeah. So the photographer snaps several shots of Victor holding this like obvious pouch of hash. Victor doesn't notice that this happens, but obviously, he's been caught carrying drugs.
Yeah.
Tony comes back to collect his drugs, and he's got a girl with him.
Right, he's already moved on.
Yeah, and she's like sitting in his lap, and he's flirting with her, and Susan's cool too. Like everybody's just, again, just being chill, free love hippies. Then it's kind of like, all right, we're gonna all head back to our own places to, continue the night as couples. So, Victor and Susan go back to his place, and instantly Susan is naked again.
Yeah. He's pouring drinks, she's naked. Then he's like, hey, let me show you this other great massaging thing, and busts out the vibrator. Or, I'm sorry, massager.
Yeah. And it's like it's an old style, like it's got like a kind of cone kind of shaped thing that like he's just kind of like rubbing it on her body, like he's just various parts of her body.
Right.
And she's acting as if she's never, like, I guess vibrating things were less common. This was, I don't know, like when was like the Masters of Sex thing? Like that was earlier than the 70s. It seems like that would have been like 50s or 60s.
Right.
Either way, like this seems like a novelty to her. And she's definitely enjoying it. Yeah, that was the Masters and Johnson experiments were like late 50s through the end of the 60s. So yeah, still relatively new on the scene.
Yeah. About 96 or 1966. Roughly.
Yeah. So yeah, but she's enjoying it. They're kind of like flirting. It's foreplay. And again, she's like, "Why won't you get undressed, Victor?" And he's like, "I can't. Like, I don't do that."
She wants to use the vibrator on him or the massager on him too.
Yeah, and he's very resistant. And then we just cut away to a group of male students, including Victor, all standing in the dean's office.
Right, they're getting berated for basically doing pot.
And apparently the school newspaper did like this big expose on like the prevalence of marijuana at the school, and narked out all these kids, but especially Victor, who has his picture on the front page of the paper holding a bag of hash.
I feel like in real life people would just be like, "You're dumb. That's dumb." Everyone knows this is being done.
Oh yeah. And like the dean pretty much says as much. Like he's like, I know stuff like this is going on campus, and I've spent all this time defending your freedoms and letting you all explore things in your own way, but when this happens, this makes the school a laughing stock, and it makes me a laughing stock. So I've got to I've got to come down hard on you all for this.
Right, but that leads me to ask, so who's like the editor, like the ultimate editor of the school paper? Because I feel like they could be like, nah, we're not running this. This is not happening if it's going to go to the news.
Yeah, I don't know what the rules were with college. Like, I know high school and college papers now, like, I think the school principal, president kind of people, they have, like, last say, like, editorial rights on papers. But, yeah, it may have been different back then.
May have.
But, yeah, either way, like, he basically, I think he suspends most of the students and expels Victor. So he's been expelled from a second college.
Right. He's literally like, yeah, everybody, you can go home, you come back in a week, and you're good to go. You, Victor, you were the poster boy of the drugs.
And he even says, like, I've turned my eye away from a mad scientist on campus, but no longer. So, like, he knows Victor's up to some weird shit. Well,
even the papers have been calling him, like, the return ride of Frankenstein and, obviously latching on to the name.
Yeah. I think the dean says something about that, he's worried about the school's future and his own future. Like, he has to make these kind of decisions for the greater good in the long run.
Right.
Victor says something about, like, I'm not going to put up with your Nazi justice.
Right.
You should be worried about the future. Basically, like, I'm going to kill you.
Right. It's like, is that, though? Because he seems pretty level-headed. Don't get me wrong. He probably should have just suspended Victor as well. Mm-hmm. Because it's like, that's really unfair that he gets, fucked over for that. But
just because he's got the photographic evidence. Mm-hmm. But yeah, Victor is definitely not taking it well. So all the guys leave, and they're all just kind of like, walking around. And they're kind of all debating, like, if it would be worth it for Victor to appeal his expulsion.
Right. And to a point, Tony's like, yeah, we can all, like, kind of side with Victor and, like, get his expulsion overturned. And everyone's like, yeah, but is that worth it for us? Mm-hmm. Will that help us? No, it'll probably get us expelled as well.
Yeah, and David's like, you've already got a good education. Like, you don't need this degree. Like, you might as well just move on and do whatever you were wanting to do after and let us continue our college careers.
To a point, that makes sense, right?
Yeah. And then Victor's like, well, I guess if I'm gone, I need to go to the lab to collect some of my personal equipment that I had left behind there. But I do know that we keep some super concentrated alcohol that, you could probably get drunk with it if you guys want to come by. We could, hang out in the lab.
I don't give a shit what you tell me. If you're telling me to come to a lab to drink something, fuck off. I'm going home. Right then, right there. Yeah. It's like, if it's actually really good shit, it's probably too good. Mm-hmm. Regardless, I'm ending up in a morgue at the end of the night.
Right. And yeah, so they're all down. They go back to the lab. And not only does Victor pour, this is like pure grain alcohol. This is like not for consumption.
No, this is definitely just for science. Mm-hmm. Probability alchemy as well.
And then he mixes some bubbling stuff in it, and they're like, what's that? And he's like, oh, that's just some additives for flavor or something.
Well, though, he's like, it helps. It's something for the alcohol to latch onto. And I'm like, that's going to fuck you up even more. Don't do that. Don't do that. Yeah. You're drinking Everclear, people. Stop.
And so, they all toast and take a drink, and Victor takes that, obvious, doesn't let the liquid touch his mouth type drink.
Okay, and also, what kind of people are these just, gulping down the whole drink? It's like, no, I'll take a sip, bud, Mm-hmm. And the fact that you didn't, I'm throwing it out. But nobody does that. Nobody does that.
Yep, and so they all immediately just pass out, faint, hit the ground. Mm-hmm. And then while they're unconscious, Victor injects them all with his new electrodes.
Right, but he gives Tony a special injection, he says.
Yeah, a little something extra.
Mm-hmm.
And then after he does that, he lays down on the ground next to them, and everybody else starts to wake up, and he wakes up last like, oh, wow, that was some good shit, guys. Like,
right.
We're all real drunk, right? And everybody's just like, yeah, man, that was intense. They just all think that this was perfectly normal.
Right. The fact that they passed out and woke up a couple hours later, or presumably a couple hours later.
Yeah, fully blacked out, and they're just like, yeah, man, that was awesome. We had a good time. It's like,
hey, you know what we should do right now? We should go drinking and smoking dope again. Immediately.
Right. They go to the university cemetery, and they're just sitting around the graves. And this is the best joke in the whole movie for sure. He's like, it's a bunch of stone heads by the headstones.
Hey! I hope the writer got paid well for that one.
Yeah.
That's
and,
funny.
you know, Victor is there. He's obviously not partaking of the weed.
Right, but Tony's like, I don't want the weed either because that might mess with my training. Dude, you drank just like super alcohol. What do you...
Right.
The logic.
Yeah. And then, so Victor turns on his remote, and it's like the other two guys one loses control of his arms and one of his legs.
Right, yeah. So David he tries to play the harmonica, and like Victor basically freezes his hands in place, and the other guy just can't stand up, and he's like, hey, Tony, just beat the shit out of these guys.
Yeah. So it's like the other two got like half and half, but he's got full control of Tony, who, he like knocks them both out, then throws them in an open grave, presumably like either they're already dead or they're going to be buried alive and soon dead.
Right. It seems like Tony has super strength now at this point, because like every move he does kills people. I guess it's that Taekwondo training.
Yeah, there's something coming up that definitely made me laugh at how intense.
Right? The punch from hell.
But so yeah, Victor and Tony go back to Victor's apartment where Susan's already there waiting, and they tell her that Victor has been expelled, and she's obviously concerned, worried for Victor.
Right, and it's your friend Debbie and Ken that got me and Tony expelled, even though Tony didn't get expelled.
Yeah. And, Tony's sitting there and he's like, man, ever since we had that super alcohol at the lab, I've been feeling a little off. I think I'm not remembering some stuff that happened. I've got like blackout chunks of time. Very strange. Victor obviously knows what's up and wouldn't care anyway. And he's like,
no.
I've decided I am going to stay here. I'm going to clear my name.
I'm going to speak to Ken, Debbie, and Cantwell.
Yeah, I'm gonna clear things up with the three people who put me here, and everything's gonna be fine.
Right.
And then Victor's like, well, since you're feeling a little off, why don't you can just crash here on the sofa? That's fine, Tony. You can stay here.
Right, just within my remote control range, right?
Right. And then we cut to Tony kind of walking like a zombie, stalking through the library where we see Ken, the reporter, who's like working on some research. Tony just like walks over to him, and the guy has a conversation like, oh, are you already studying for finals? It's a little early. I wouldn't expect you to be here.
Right. Sorry about that report I did.
And Tony doesn't say anything because he's in like zombie hypnotized mode. And then he just suddenly punches the guy with such force that like instantly he just starts like coughing up blood and just like falls over dead immediately.
The punch from hell. I love it. And you know what he does? Apparently Victor has made the zombie the best zombie in the world, because he literally just picks the body up, puts it in the book chute, and closes the door and sends him down one flight of stairs.
And this poor old lady librarian opens up the like little dumbwaiter door, and there's just like a corpse falls out at her. And she, obviously she screams.
And we get some like alarm thing going on.
And then we just cut to the photographer, the girl, Debbie. She's in the dark room working, and a door opens and she sees a silhouette of someone walking.
Well, Tony calls her first. He calls her first, I guess, in a way to make sure that she's there. But when she picks it up, he doesn't answer. And he just creepily shuts or hangs up the phone. Then, he just immediately opens up the door, and she's like, why are you coming into a dark room without telling anybody, asshole? You just ruined all the photos. Yeah, she's pissed, and he closes the door. For those who don't know what we're talking about, dark rooms were a place where you had to develop photos before digital was a thing. Oh God, yeah. You right? Yeah. Yeah, we literally had a dark room in my high school. Like, I know they're a more old thing, but they were still being used not that long ago. But yeah, it was like you used like chemical baths, and you could only have like red light. That was the only light that was safe in the room, so you could see. Any other light would fuck everything up. Yeah. So you had to either like make sure everything was good before you came in, or some would have like a special rotating door that would never let light in. Right. But yeah, in this case, he just strolls in, fucking up her photos, and she's kind of like, like
like you said, like, thanks a lot, asshole. You just messed up all this work. And then he just, like, comes over to her with a bunch of film and, like, starts, like, strangling her with it,
Right.
and then just shoves her face down in the, like, chemicals bath and drowns her.
Yeah, that's a bad way to go.
Yeah, I thought that was a cool kill scene, though. Like, the super punch was just like, okay, whatever. But this was like it was a little more clever.
This had some style to it.
Yeah. I think then we see Victor bumping into Preston.
Yeah, the next day.
Yeah, and they're talking, and Victor's like, I'm going to stick around, I'm going to clear my name, and Preston's like, cool, that's great, I support you, I'll go talk to the dean even, I'll try to help.
Right, well, not only that, he's like, yeah, so Cantwell's going to be leaving tonight at precisely 9 p.m., so, I mean, here's where he's going to be for the rest of the day until he leaves at 9 p.m.
Yeah, and he's like, I'll just wait, I'll talk to him when he comes back, assuming he comes back.
Right,
but that's
like... It's like Preston knows.
And then he's like, I will support you, but in the meantime, how about you give me that key back? Because I don't want to get into any trouble, if people find out that you have this key while you're technically expelled.
Right, and of course, Victor's finally like, yeah, sure, whatever, but all right.
Yeah.
And then we cut to later that night where Victor's like actually kind of worrying. He's like, did we get here too late? Are we here too early? When's Cantwell going to show up? And turns out he didn't need to worry about any of that because Cantwell just walks out of what building was it?
Yeah, I don't know if it was his office or if it was another.
Right.
I can't remember.
Well, anyway, he's like, hey, Tony, get him.
Yeah, and like Tony comes walking up to him and the dean's like, what do you want? And Tony's just like standing there all zombie and he's like, no, seriously, like, I gotta go. If you have, out with it. What do you need? And then Tony just, like, kicks him, and he falls down, and then Tony just, like, beats him to death.
Right. Which, okay, fair, I guess.
And he picks something up that he uses. I'm not sure if it's, like, a cane or just some random thing on the ground.
He hits Cantwell in the face with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then it's like the next morning, Susan wakes up before Victor and like turns on the radio and hears a news report of, the dean being killed.
Well, not just the dean. They're like, so Ken, Debbie, and Dean Cantwell were murdered last night.
Yeah. And she's like, boy, what's happening with this world? All these strange, mysterious deaths. And she wakes Victor up like, hey, listen to this crazy news I just heard on the radio. Mm-hmm. And she doesn't seem to suspect him at all.
No.
And then she kind of like walks off frame. She's obviously naked again, but she goes and gets dressed off frame and is like talking to Victor. And then she's like, hey, have you seen Tony, by the way? I haven't seen him in a little while.
Victor's like, yeah, I dropped him off at home. Tony's at home. Don't worry about where Tony is. He's at home.
Yeah, and then she comes back in and she's like, I have to go. I'm supposed to be at the museum and I'm running late. And so it seems like once the Tony thing kind of clicked for her, she's like, oh, Victor's up to something.
Well, yeah, but obviously she hasn't figured it out yet. We'll see when she figures it out exactly. Mm-hmm. But as she leaves, Victor is like, hey, Tony, I need you to take care of something for me.
Yeah. And so then we cut to the museum, which I guess Susan works there, I guess is what's going on.
I guess.
But we've got like a field trip of a bunch of elementary kids that are, led off a bus and they're getting ready to go into the museum. They've got a teacher with them.
And also, this bothers me because they're like, oh, Rachel's missing. And I'm like, oh, is Rachel going to become a plot point? No. Nope. Rachel doesn't matter. They lost this kid named Rachel. Who knows where she is? I don't.
And not only is she not a plot point, but the elementary teacher is like, has anybody seen well, never mind. Let's just go on into like the 70s. Like, people do not give a fuck about their kids. They're like,
Rachel,
she'll turn up. It'll be fine.
Yeah. Whether she's dead or alive, I can't say it, but she'll turn up.
Yeah. So they all go inside. Meanwhile, we see Tony arriving. He's doing his kind of zombie stalking thing.
Right. We actually see Victor with the control box in hand this time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And eventually Tony finds Susan and starts...
Well, before he does, we see Susan sitting there, like, and she literally has everybody who's died names written down, and she's like, oh shit, Victor!
Yeah, I forgot about it. It's like she's doing like an elaborate like serial killer board with like the yarn and stuff, but it's literally just a list of 4 names.
Yeah, of everyone who's been murdered.
And yeah, but then Tony gets to her and it, like, starts kind of like stalking towards her, and she's like, Tony, you know, it's me. Break free. Like, you don't have to let Victor control you.
Use your taekwondo to free yourself.
But he starts choking her. Like, it looks like, she's a goner. Like, he's choking her for a little while. And then a kid runs around a corner and bumps into Victor, causing him to drop his controller, which breaks on the ground.
Oh no, he's lost control of Tony because of a kid that's not named Rachel. I'm just saying, that's a missed opportunity.
And so then Tony and Susan start looking for Victor.
Right. They're like, oh, we know what's up. And Victor's like, shit, I got a skedaddle.
But he does the horror movie thing of running up the stairs instead of downstairs. So, Tony and Susan are in hot pursuit. And once they get... And this is like, big kind of grand staircase with like a balcony kind of thing. Once they get up really high...
Now, did I get this wrong? Did Tony technically throw Victor over, or did Victor just jump?
I think Tony hit him, like punched him so hard he just like flipped over the railing.
The taekwondo did actually come into effect.
Yeah. So, of course, Victor falls several stories down to his death.
With his shirt ripped wide open, because we're going to see something here in a moment.
Yeah, so then, Susan and Tony rush downstairs to check on Victor, and they're standing there, and we see that Victor's back is, like, stitched up, but then the stitches start, like, automatically unstitching themselves.
Right. I'm like, is he an alien? Is Alien gonna pop out? What's happening here?
Like, it would have made more sense if the stitches had burst upon impact, but, like, I don't know what's causing them to unstitch.
Right. Like magic.
Yeah, but either way, they see that, like, Victor is a created person, that he is not strictly human.
So, and of course, Tony's like, so if he was a creation, who's the real Frankenstein?
And then we just cut to outside. We've got Professor Preston holding a remote control of his own.
Which is a fucking great... It's a great visual. Like, this movie went from ridiculous to amazing in 0.1 seconds. Mm-hmm. Because
the ending of this really seals the deal for me, too. And it's like the Usual Suspects
yeah.
Or something.
This is...
Just, chucks it in the trash can and goes strolling away.
What the fuck is that guy's name?
Kaiser Soze.
Kaiser Soze. Preston is Kaiser Soze. We didn't know he was Frankenstein all along.
And, he's walking away, and we hear little, bits of dialogue from the movie of Victor.
We get flickering images of everything that's happened as well. Yeah,
so it's like Preston has been watching the world through Victor's eyes and ears this whole time. And then the last one that we get is when Victor had gotten expelled, and he says, I'll bleed, but then I'll get up and I'll keep fighting.
Yeah, I'll rise to fight again.
Yeah, and Preston kind of smiles at that, like, yep, I'm going to do that. I'm going to try again. And he just kind of walks away, and, the credits roll as he's, strolling away down the street.
Right, and then we get a song about taking control of yourself, which, that's a nice little thing right there.
Yeah.
So it's obviously, I can see why it's been overlooked. Mm-hmm. But the end, I'm surprised it doesn't have at least a cult following, because of the sheer ridiculousness of it, and two, the fact that they did the Kaiser Soze thing at the end before Usual Suspects did.
Yeah, it's a pretty clever twist. There's nothing to, of course, after the fact, and it's like, oh, that's why Victor wouldn't take off his clothes. He knows he's got all these weird stitches and everything.
Right, and that's also why. Preston was like, I need your brain specifically, because you are my working prototype.
Yeah, but it's clever. It's fun. It's like an hour 20. It's a pretty simple, straightforward movie. It's and I feel like there's a lot of these kind of hippie exploitation movies that kind of have gotten a resurgence now. I feel like maybe this one's just it's kind of riding a line where it's there's not enough nudity in it for it to be a sexploitation movie, but it's not horrific enough to be a outright horror movie from the 70s. There's not really gore or anything, other than the One Punch thing.
It's almost like a proto slasher to a degree, right?
Yeah.
Huh.
What movie it's kind of like is the decade Frankenstein ones. Was it I can't remember if it was 90 or 2000, where there was the one where the woman's in a coma and she's psychically controlling her that guy who then kills her rapists and everything.
Right.
Like,
was it 1990? I feel like it was. It was a Frankenstein. Yeah.
It was either 90 or 2000, but can't remember which one of the two. But yeah, it has a similar vibe in that, it's like somebody using a tool as like a slasher, basically. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. It seems like a weird curiosity. It seems like it's something that would be ripe for, like Severin or something to like pick up and do like a kind of nice re-release of it.
Yeah, I think they could, that would be interesting to see that. I would be there for it. Even if they were to try and do a remake, I think it would still be fresh enough. And especially now with AI, you actually have teeth, as opposed to just hippies wanting to be Luddites and,
Yeah, and the version that we found, like we said, there's a lot of like glitchy static going on in it. It's also full frame because it's been like taped off of TV and everything.
Right.
So there's no like definitive like nice version of this out there anywhere. So yeah, it seems like it would be really nice if some company were able to get hands on like original negatives and clean it up and everything.
Yeah, it'd be nice to do that.
Yeah. But it's fun. It's definitely worth checking out. We don't tend to we're very in favor of like supporting creators and physical media and stuff. But this one, you're gonna have to do some fishy stuff to get it because that's the only way it's available. So if you're good with that, like you should definitely track it down because it's definitely worth a watch.
If you have the morals of a Frankenstein.
Exactly. Yeah.
Fair enough. All right, where can they find us?
So you can find us on all the socials at The Frankencast. You can email us at thefrankencast@gmail.com. You can also find us over on YouTube. And we're also over at patreon.com/thefrankencast, where we're still doing our free 1-week trials where you can jump in, try before you buy, see, binge through a few, see if it's something that you want to stick around for. We'd love for you to hear some stuff, whether you stick around or not.
Yeah, there's a lot of wild and fun stuff, especially talks about not only what brought us into kind of the Frankenstein fandom, but also kind of our mental, not necessarily our mental issues, but what we deal with mentally and what that's related to as far as Frankenstein goes. So.
There's less of a format, so we get more personal. We explore like weird old TV shows, just odds and ends. There's a diverse mix of stuff over there.
Yeah, we dabble in a little pornography, Frankenstein pornography every once in a while.
Yeah.
Just to keep it fresh.
Right.
Fair enough. All right, Anthony. So to continue on our back to school special, I'm not even going to try to mess with it. We're going to do something a little newer.
Yeah, so we've kind of mentioned, I think we talked about this a little bit in our Tim Kirk bonus episode, if you've listened to that. A new movie just came out. It's on video on demand now, called The Angry Black Girl and Her Monster. And we were waiting for it to come out where everybody could see it before we talked about it, and it is now available, so we're really excited to check it out. So we'll be talking about that next week.
Yeah, check it out before we talk about it next week. Absolutely. I believe special guests as well, possibly?
I believe so. I think we may have somebody on with a little bit of helpful insight as to what's going on in this one.
Excellent. All right, well, if that's all we have to say, then to be continued.
Looks like you survived another episode. The Frankencast is a production of FCR Media. It's hosted by Anthony Bowman and Eric Velasquez. Follow us on Twitter at The Frankencast, or send us a letter at thefrankencast@gmail.com. Our cover art is by Amanda Keller. You can find her at Keller Illustrations on Instagram. Our theme music is by Vivek Abhishek. Thanks for listening.
Oh, we didn't tease next week. I can edit it in. But...
Well, let's cut that.